Welcome to Dollars and Cents with Freedman Financial, the home for financial advice in a language you can understand. Created by Marc Freedman of Freedman Financial, he and his team of certified financial planner professionals will discuss timely topics that help individuals and families make smart financial decisions. And now, get ready for this week's edition of Dollars and Cents with Freedman Financial.
Welcome back to another edition of Dollars and Cents with Freedman Financial. My name is Marc Freedman.
And I'm Christian Karcher.
And we're here to provide you with some financial advice in a language you can understand. You know, each and every week we try to bring you stories, ideas, concepts that come across our desk every single day. We meet with so many different clients. At Freedman Financial, many people ask, how many clients do you have? What's the scope and breadth of what your practice looks like? Well, just so that you know, a little history, our firm was founded in 1968 by my father, Barry Freedman. Dad retired in 2007. That's when I took over running the business, but I did join the firm in 1991. Christian, when did you join Freedman Financial?
2017, the summer of 2017.
Oh, so you've been here a long time.
I sure have. I got to see the 50th anniversary of Freedman Financial.
Wait, wow, 1968, so that would make it 2018.
It was the year after I had started.
That's right. So we're just a few years away from our 60th anniversary.
Oh, we're going to have to start planning.
Yeah, we should have to plan for that, yeah. So just so you know, Freedman Financial, located in Peabody, Massachusetts, we've primarily been a community-driven financial planning and investment management firm where 90% of our clients live or had roots within 10 to 15 miles of this very office. So it's very, very local. Now, do we have clients from across the country? Sure we do, but it's a smaller percentage of our client base. Some of our clients have moved to the Carolinas, or moved to Florida, or moved to Texas, or Georgia, or Arizona. Of course, we still stay in touch with them and work with them. But there's 550 households that we serve here at Freedman Financial, and we provide them with ongoing financial planning and investment management needs. And this week, we came across a situation where it raised one of those issues of people trying to understand what happens when someone gets ill, someone needs additional care, someone passes away, someone's getting close to passing away. What does the spouse do? What do the kids do? What are the rules that are allowed? What can you do now, and what stops when someone passes away? Christian, you got any perspectives on that?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of things to be thinking about, and this is one of those things, I think we talked about this on a previous episode, where you don't really know what you have until it needs to be tested. And so that's one of the great things about, consulting with a financial advisor prior to, running through these situations where you can say, this is how things are lined up. So a lot of times when the situation occurs where someone is incapacitated, or maybe they have dementia and they can no longer make those decisions for themselves, it becomes a question for the family and the spouse of, okay, who's making decisions, who can make decisions, and how does that all work from an operational standpoint?
Yeah, and so a lot of that starts with two important instances. Number one is proper estate planning. And estate doesn't mean when you're dead. Estate can mean how we manage your estate wishes while you're alive. And the other is the proper registration of the investments that you might own. So many people have heard this idea that, well, I'm a joint owner. Maybe you're married and you become a joint owner with your spouse. And then suddenly a spouse passes away. And now you're left as the sole owner on the account. But you may say, well, I want my children to make sure that they're the beneficiaries of that account. But if they're not named properly under the registration, where it just says your name, John Smith, and there's no other registration, the children may get that money, but it would have to go through probate first. One way to avoid that is doing what, Christian?
Oh, just adding what's called a TOD, or a transfer on death, or a POD, a payable on death, that just says it's a beneficiary designation for a non-retirement account, a bank account, that says, if I pass away, this is who I want it to go to directly.
So recently, or this past week, we ran into a situation where someone had lost their spouse, and this person has 3 children. And they said, well, I think I will just name my son as the co-owner on the account. I'll just make it joint with him, so that if I were to get ill, if something were to happen to me or if I were to die, my son could continue to write checks on my behalf and do that. And this was a large account, and I said to them, you know, you may not want to do that because if you were to pass away, all that money would just go to your son. And he says, yeah, but, well, he would just give it to share it with his children. I share it with his siblings. I said, can you be sure of that? And he says, well, the kids could take him to court if he didn't. And our opinion is probably not, because if you set up this joint account with your son, it's your son's money if you were to pass away. So one of the ways that we get around trying to address this and honor the needs of the family is still, you know, you can name yourself as the primary owner, name the children as transfer on death, but work with an attorney to draw up a power of attorney. And maybe you can explain how that works, Christian.
Sure. A power of attorney allows you to name someone to operate on your behalf in financial matters. So a power of attorney, if you are incapacitated, can go and sign checks for you, or go to the bank account and say, okay, I am the power of attorney for this person. They're no longer able to access this money. They don't have the faculties to do so, and now some paperwork can be exchanged. They give them the power of attorney, and now they can operate that account as if they were the owner, but they must act on your behalf.
That's right. They can do that on your behalf. And if you were to die, the power of attorney expires the moment you've died.
Yeah, that's one of those things that a lot of people don't realize. And so, you know, you might have a child who's named the power of attorney for a parent. And for many years, they're paying all the bills, they're putting everything through that bank account, and then all of a sudden, the parent passes away. And they think, okay, well, I can still pay all of the funeral bills out of I'm the power of attorney. The power of attorney dies with the person. And so in that situation, you would have to say, okay, now we need to make sure we transfer the registration following that transfer on death. Or if it doesn't have a transfer on death, then it would have to go through that probate process.
Yeah, and so one of the other things that people will say, well, what if I put that account while I'm alive into a trust? So you re-register your account in the name of a trust. And you say, well, if something happens to me, my son or my daughter, whomever, could act as power of attorney if I'm unable to sign checks, to operate with the proper capacity to do so. Well, Christian, it doesn't work that way, does it, when a trust is involved?
No, and we see this a lot where people have a trust, they've drafted a trust. In that trust it says, I am the trustee, and here are my successor trustees if I'm unable to act. And a lot of times when that moment happens where you are no longer able to act, you can't really sign away paperwork to say, okay, I'm changing my trustees. And your children might look at your estate planning documents and say, oh, there's this power of attorney. We're going to use this for the trust account. Unfortunately, most institutions will not accept a power of attorney for a trusted position. And so in that situation, you have to have the trust updated, amended, and have the successors named as the primary now trustees of that trust, completely absent of the power of attorney that you have.
So, like we said earlier, I mean, it's really important that you understand the registrations of your accounts. That's important. It's important that you have estate planning documents drafted. We've just talked about a power of attorney today. Of course, there are other things like a healthcare proxy, a living will, a DNR, a will. Perhaps you need a trust. All of those things. But registration is important. Estate planning is important. But also understanding how all of that stuff works when it needs to come into reality. I think, Christian, there's a lot of instances where people just say, well, I've got a trust, everything's solved now.
Yeah, that's very common. People go and get their estate planning documents drafted. They say, here they are, this is great. And they haven't re-registered anything in the name of a trust. Or they haven't looked at their beneficiary designations. I got all this estate planning documents done. It might cost you $1,000, $2,000 to get those documents drafted. Meanwhile, your primary asset, your 401k at work, let's say that's $1 million, and you don't have the correct beneficiary named. That happens. And so that is why drafting estate planning documents is just step one of the estate planning process.
Right, you need to fund those documents. So, we have instances all the time where people will come into our office, new prospects come walking into the office, they say, well, I've got everything in trust. And we generally, as a rule, don't agree to anything that you say unless we have documentation to support it. Because we will find that you might have trusts that were drafted, and then you have a joint account or a joint bank account, a joint brokerage account. And you say, yeah, but I have a trust now. Well, you might have a trust that's sitting over here, but if you haven't given that trust to the institutions that are holding your joint accounts or your individual accounts or whatever the way the account is registered for now, and say, I need to re-register these accounts in the name of the trust is essentially useless. And that's a big surprise to a lot of people. And so the point that we're trying to make today is that when you're approaching the challenging times in someone's life, when their health is failing, their physical ability to do things is diminishing, their mental capacity is struggling, and you know, or you think you know, that you've been ultimately put in charge, or you're the next person up to step up to help. You may know that there are some documents that are out there, but understanding how those documents are executed, how you can step in and play that role as that caretaker, as that power of attorney, or frankly, as the next trustee, as the person who can be there for somebody, God forbid you pass away, to make those decisions, to write those checks. You need to know the mechanics of how it all works. And honestly, most people don't. Most people assume they know something, but they don't know enough. At Freedman Financial, sadly, because we've been around since 1968, we deal with about 24 deaths a year in our office. That's in addition to those that fall ill, have health challenges, etc. So we know how to properly guide you when those challenging situations present themselves. That's what we call financial advice in a language you can understand. Christian, is there anything else you'd like to add?
I was going to say, there is one more thing I would love to add. As you're approaching those years where you say, you know, I'm getting older, a lot is going on health-wise, I'm concerned about what that looks like in the next 5, 10, 15 years. It can be really valuable to have a family meeting, either with a financial planner or just within the family, to say, hey, this is how I want things to be handled during those years. Because then that gives your children an idea of, this is what mom and dad wanted. This is how they wanted things handled. And now they're not guessing. It doesn't put them in a weird position where you've got different siblings fighting over what should be done. Having a cohesive plan and an idea of what you want to happen in those years and how you want things to be handled is incredibly valuable.
Yeah, and most people don't realize that that's something that we do all the time here at our office. We host those meetings and say, well, how much would something like that cost? Well, if you're a client of our office, it's part of the relationship that we have with you. So there is no additional cost, assuming you're a client of the office, of course. And we do that regularly. Now, oftentimes people say, well, I don't want my kids exposed to see how much money I have and where all the dollars are. We don't have to get into that. It's all about mechanics. It's all about explaining to the children, to you, about what the process looks like now. If you became incapacitated, if you were to pass away, here's what would happen. We don't have to get into the numbers. We just get into the process. And let me tell you, no child wants to be surprised to find out that they've been appointed executor or trustee without having a conversation with them first and them understanding what that all means. So those are some of our estate planning and financial planning topics for the day. I think those were important things to talk about. But one additional thing, I'm going to shift gears here for a second. If you're local, you may know that next week starts the Topsfield Fair. It's a very big event here on the North Shore of North Shore of Massachusetts. We're celebrating our 206th year. More than 500,000 people will pass through the turnstiles to see the giant pumpkin, to climb the grease pole, to see the chicks, to see the cows, to see the horses, to go on the rides, to eat all the food. And of course, many people will be visiting a booth that my wife Laura and I run called the B'nai B'rith booth. I'll tell you about that in a second. But if you were thinking of going to the Topsfield Fair, and I strongly encourage you to do so, don't wait until the day of the fair to get your tickets. You can go to the Topsfield Fair booth today or up until Thursday. The fair opens next Friday, and get discounted admission tickets, discounted Parking passes, discounted. Food vouchers, all of that stuff is available to you because people always complain, man, it's expensive to go to the fair. And I will tell you, from a guy that's running a food booth this year, I know our prices have had to go up because our food costs have gone up. So if you can save yourself some money, here's some financial advice in a language you can understand. If you can save yourself some money, go early, get your tickets. And you know what? If you show up on Saturday, October 12th, and visit the B'nai B'rith booth, where we sell hot dogs, pastrami, brisket, knishes, all sorts of Jewish food at the Topsfield Fair, and other stuff too. Guess who's working?
This guy.
First time, right?
I'm very excited. I'm excited to see the long lines. I'm excited to yell oy vey as the oy vey sandwiches go out. I'm looking forward to it.
It's going to be a great time. Lots of people there. If you happen to go to the Topsfield Fair during the week, be sure to look for me, look for my wife, look for Christian. Jody's going to be there. Plus, we have 280 volunteer slots that we need to fill. We have already filled them for the Topsfield Fair. So lots of people work in this booth. This is the real deal kind of booth. Come visit us. We'll see you then. That's going to do it for us this week. I do want to remind you that if you'd like to get our free weekly newsletter that comes out every Friday, 10:30 in the morning, all you need to do is go to our website, freedmanfinancial.com. That's Freedman.
2 E's and a D.
Financial.com. Go to the bottom of any page, put in your name, your email address, and boom, you'll get our newsletter. And of course, if now is the time for you to get serious about your financial planning needs, I hope you'll give us a call. Chris, you want to give them the phone number?
Yeah, our phone number is 978-531-8108.
How about one more time?
978-531-8108.
See, he's wondering why I do this a second time, because the first time you heard it, you said, oh my God, will I remember it? And then you realize you had a pen on your table and you can write it down the
There you
second
go.
time.
So it's 978-531-8108. We'll do it a third time.
A third
Just
time.
for
Well,
you.
all right. Well, Kristen, thanks for joining me. That's going to do it for us this week. Everyone have a wonderful weekend, and thank you for joining us on Dollars and Cents. You've received financial advice in a language you can understand. Have a great day.
During today's episode of Dollars and Cents with Freedman Financial, your host may have discussed specific financial planning and investment ideas that are for general information only and not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations. Please remember that investing involves risk and may include loss of principal. Always consult a certified financial planner professional, qualified attorney, or tax advisor prior to investing to determine what is appropriate for you. Securities and advisory services offered through LPL Financial, a registered investment advisor, member FINRA, SIPC.